over now to a prolific deal maker, Nick van Marken, who was formerly the head of Deloitte's global hospitality practice, and now is an independent consultant focused on deals in Africa. So, Nick, if I can ask you to come up and then introduce your panel session here, looking at the growing brands in Africa.
Thanks, Bud.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and great to be back in Addis, as always. I'm pleased to say we've got three tremendous folk joining us on stage, which are going to talk about growing the footprint in Africa, which, of course, is pretty much the objective for everyone these days. And without further ado, perhaps I can invite Pascal Gauvin. Pascal is the Managing Director for India, Middle East, Africa at IHG. Bienvenue, Pascal.
Thank you, Nick.
Mark Willis, CEO for Accor, Middle East and Africa. Mark, nice to see you. And finally, Tim Cordon, who's the Senior Vice President for Middle East Africa at Radisson. Thanks, Tim. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We've got about 23 minutes and 58 seconds.
Oh, short answers.
According to the clock. Sure. Now, I know you all want to get to your pipeline and how wonderfully you're doing, but just before I let you loose on that, can we just talk a little about performance? Just listening to Tom and looking at the data that's been coming through, it's pretty clear the first half of the year has been maybe a little softer than most of us would expect and perhaps wish for. Mark, maybe I'll start with you. What do you put that down to, and does it worry you in any sense? Does it worry you in any sense? I'll try and get that right.
Is mine on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it worry me? You know, as always, performance is cyclical, of course. I think it's fair to say that, and the statistics show that before, Sub-Saharan Africa has been relatively soft, Q1, Q2. If you look at Africa as a whole, from an Accor perspective in particular, North Africa, where we have such a strong portfolio, over 160 hotels on the continent in operation, but over 90 in North Africa. Key markets such as Morocco, where we're over 40 hotels, has traded wonderfully well Q1, Q2. And the outlook to the year end looks extremely positive also, double-digit growth on last year. Algeria has been particularly soft, driven by the political situation there, obviously, and some business and investment uncertainty. But that's also then countered by Tunisia and Egypt, which have had a fabulous year. And of course, Egypt has come from a low base in the last 4 or 5 years, but you know, some super growth there. And we have over 30 hotels there and 25 in the pipeline, so it's relatively or very important to us. I think, as I say, it's a cyclical perspective. The quality of the brands on the continent continues to grow, and I'm sure it'll be a change around as we move forward.
So, of course, what we've heard this morning from several of the speakers that, you know, it's difficult to describe Africa as just one place. In fact, what we're talking about is a multitude of markets. They're all moving at, you know, different speeds to certain extents. So it's difficult to generalize. But Pascal, what's it like from your perspective at IHG? Where are you seeing stronger performance, weaker performance across your portfolio at the moment?
Yeah, you're right. We can't talk about the continent as one. So we divided in 4 places: north, south, east, and west, to be very clear. And but the east has been affected in Kenya because of the issue there. North Africa is doing extremely well. I mean, we are very satisfied with the results, a bit like Mark says. Yeah. Algeria, we just opened a year and a half ago, and Holiday Inn, and it's just amazing, the demand, and you see the potential of the country. But again, they are going through difficult time, but on the long term, we are very satisfied and very hopeful of what's going to happen. Kenya is a cycle. We had that for many years. I mean, we've been in Kenya as a pioneer hotel at an Intercontinental for so many years. We know it happens, and we know overall, if you look at the long term, and our business is a long-term focused business. It's not once in a while. It's all right, and it will be all right. And we know the continent is changing. The continent has a massive evolution. We have to be optimistic for the future. I mean, there is, you know, we need to be there. We need to be present, and we have to believe this is going to change for the positive way. And South Africa is also a market with ups and downs. We saw Cape Town. one hotel supply in one city makes a difference to the RevPAR.
Yeah.
So you need to be very agile and making sure you understand, anticipate, and ensure that the owners, the investors, still keep the same level of profit in their hotel. That's more important, and that our guests get the right guest experience, because it's so important that people come and come back, because the world has become more resilient. People get used to everything that is happening, and that's why there is an optimistic view about the future.
Well, I don't think you can be in the hotel industry if you're not an optimist, frankly.
Yeah.
Tim, from Radisson's perspective, it's quite interesting listening to Pascal and Mark. A few years ago we were talking about Egypt and Tunisia, and it looked pretty bleak at the time. Frankly, if you're a Tunisian hotelier this morning, you're not happy, because Thomas Cook apparently owed Tunisian hoteliers £50 million, but let's set that aside. How's it looking from Radisson's perspective, and where do you see the bright spots?
I mean, like my colleagues have said, we also don't look at Africa as one basket. You have to look at the different countries. Nigeria has been a huge success story for us. We've also had a great time in Dakar. Abidjan's had a good year. So there are some real bright spots there. Tunisia's bounced back. Egypt's bounced back incredibly strongly. Sub-Saharan Africa, a little bit softer. But I would point to our ability. What we've done is we've introduced a kind of a new operating model into our hotels in Africa. And what that's enabled us to do is stay far more nimble, and far more agile, and react more quickly to some of the market trends. Because there's not a lot we can do as hoteliers about the market trend. What we can do, though, is run our businesses as well as we possibly can, protect the bottom line, and make sure that the market share isn't being eroded. And that's where we've really been focused. And whilst South Africa particularly has had a difficult couple of years, what I'm proud of is our ability that we've still been able to deliver what we said we were going to deliver to our owners in those markets because of the actions that we've taken. So I think as the market develops and as Africa becomes a more mature, let's say, place to do business, those things become much more relevant. And how we operate hotels and how efficiently we're able to operate hotels, and making sure that we do that with a local approach will be absolutely critical to the future success, in my view.
It's quite refreshing, actually, to hear the guys up here talking about protecting owners' bottom lines. I know there's a lot of audience, and I'm sure that'll keep you happy at the same time as trying to keep guests happy. It's a fine balancing act. Just let's talk about existing portfolios, and I've just actually noticed Tim's socks, which do stand out quite. I've put my zebras, but
well, I was told that you wear loud socks to AHIF.
Yeah.
So these are from one of our brands, actually. These are Radisson Red socks.
Really?
So
Clearly nobody told me.
No.
I guess I got a Radisson blue suit and Radisson Red socks.
I mean, the audience will draw their own conclusions from this information. Let's just talk about existing portfolios. Pascal, you folks, interestingly, were in Africa really early. You were talking about Nairobi earlier. That was late 60s. Kinshasa, with Intercontinental. Holiday Inn in 71, I think,
yes.
in Johannesburg, where I started my career.
Yeah.
Not in 71, but with Holiday Inn. But, and I don't want to put you on the spot, relatively speaking, you have, 6,000, 7,000 rooms now, and not as many hotels as certainly these two folks.
Yeah.
What do you put that down to? Was Africa, did you just, because if we were discussing this in China, it would be a totally different discussion. Was this just a different focus? Was there, and is that focus changing in terms of the priority of Africa for IHG?
Yeah, so we just go back quickly to history. So we were a pioneer in Africa with Intercontinental, and we had many of them in almost every country. And then we had Holiday Inn that was brought in, and then all of a sudden we had two brands that were very agile. Our owners at that time were government. And the government model just started stopping, and they were not investing in the brand anymore. And we were left with some hotel that the brand was not up to the expectation. And so slowly by surely, we moved away from these hotels because, again, guest experience is very important, brand is critical. Then we had the second phase when we started working with some partner, and South Africa, for example, and a new model introducing the franchise, which, for us at IAG is 80% of our portfolio globally is franchise, and start having really great results in South Africa, and kept a couple of hotels around East Africa and West Africa. So what's today? But we're not as certainly aggressive to really grow this market. Why? Because we are a company that are making choices, and China for us was a focus, as you say. I mean, US and China. And China today, because of our investment, we are the number one international company. In Africa, we are not. I would say by choice at that time. But of course, with the acceleration of the continent and what we see, we'd like to accelerate growth. And the way we want to do it is through partnership. First of all, it's more a franchise model that we want to push in Africa. We signed an agreement, an MDA with Valor a year ago, with a partner. Valor is a global partner for us in America, in Europe, and knows our brand, knows the value of our brand, and are able to use this brand and start moving forward with this brand. So that's exactly the model. We don't believe we can do everything. Great brand, great distribution, no value that we can add it, but sometimes we don't have the local knowledge. We want to use this partner for the local knowledge, helping us operating. Again, we just signed very recently, just now, the same MDA with AHIF, which will help us in different parts of Africa to use the same model. And our franchise model in the region is extremely strong. We are part of Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and on 1,100 hotels, 600 hotels are franchise. So we have behind system, processes, digitalization. We can train people remotely and so on. So that's the model we want to adopt. So more technology, more partnership, more delegation of some of the management of our brand by specialized people.
Fair enough. Tim, from Radisson's perspective, I mean, you folks theoretically arrived a little bit late. 2000, you opened in Cape Town, but you've been on a bit of a tear, frankly, ever since then. I don't know what Mr. McLaughlin's doing, but he must be a busy man.
That's right.
And you've got, 40 hotels, 9,000 rooms, and sort of rapidly heading towards a target of, I think your 2022 target was 23,000 rooms.
Yeah, 130 hotels.
Yeah.
We've got about 100 hotels today in operation and in the pipeline, and we want to have 130 by the end of 2022, which I think is a pretty soft target, actually. We can get.
You think it's a soft target? Your development guys are sort of,
Well said.
Yeah.
bit of mattress in there.
I don't want to say anything too much, but yeah, it's a soft target. I mean, we signed 12 hotels this year, so we're proud of that.
12 is not very many, let's be honest. Andrew, come on.
But you're right, we came to Africa in 1999, so we're 20 years on a continent, so we had to play a little bit of catch-up. We were, however, the first company that came in and invested, so we formed a JV in Africa in 1999, and I think we were the first to do that, along with an investment platform which we called Afrinord, a trio of Scandinavian banks. So we had the ability to go to hotel owners and say, this is a great project, let us help you finance it, let us help you complete it. And that really kick-started what I would say is a great success story. Radisson Blu's been the fastest organic growing brand in Africa for the last 5 years, and long may that continue. We strongly believe in Africa. Since we came here 20 years ago, we've been one of the fastest growing, as you say, and it's a massive part of our future. With our ownership having changed now, and we're fully owned by Yin Yang and a Chinese company, the alignment between China and Africa, I think, is very clear for everyone to see here. But it opens a door to an incredible number of opportunities for us. When you consider that our Yin Yang partner has a loyalty program with 148 million members, it's the largest in the world, and 120 million of those members are in China. And when that loyalty program is able to, you can earn and burn your points in a Radisson Blu or any Radisson hotel, I think that represents a fantastic opportunity for us, particularly here in Africa.
Mark, I mean, you're on record as saying your focus is to consolidate your position in Francophone West Africa, to drive growth in East Africa, and a focus on Southern Africa. You've already talked about North Africa, and Accor, of course, have been in North Africa for a very long time. You're pretty dominant up there. Yeah. can you just expand on that a little? Where are you sort of directing most effort in terms of both brands, which it's difficult to keep up with because you've got, what, 37, 38?
38.
38, yeah. So it was, last time I was on stage with Accor, I'm sure it was 2 less, but you know, it's a couple a week. Where are you focusing in terms of brand specifically? Because one of the interesting things that Tom highlighted was that in the top 10 brands in Africa, of course, they're all international. We don't have a top 10 African brand.
Which,
although
as I mentioned, it's a shame.
Yeah,
It's a shame.
there's a few. There's Anomo. There's a few coming along. There's several people in the audience that would like to be a top 10 brand, eventually. Where are you focusing your efforts in terms of brands?
I mean, you're right with your comments of our focus on East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, which, given the portfolio of brands, and yes, there's a huge portfolio, but let's be clear, some of those brands are regional brands, regionally specific. Accor essentially has 12 key brands, all present on the continent, or present or coming. Our focus very much East and Sub-Saharan Africa. You saw there in the top 10, I think Ibis was sitting 4. It's quite an interesting one, the growth in the eco mid-scale segment across the continent, amongst the international brands, Holiday Inn also with Pascal. That's been interesting to see. I mean, for us, key focus for us is Mantis. Obviously, we're 1 year in with Mantis. It's been an interesting merger. It happened just before I arrived last year. This huge corporate infrastructure that is Accor, fast approaching 5,000 hotels, and Mantis, which is a totally different organization, headed up by Paul and Adrian Gardner, 2 absolute entrepreneurs, very active in that ecotourism space, which, as we know, is a growing element of our business, not only in Africa, but worldwide. So that's a key focus for us. They understand luxury and they understand guest experience, which is again another interesting topic for us. So that's been a great merger and acquisition, a great collaboration, fully integrated with the system, fully integrated with the loyalty program. It's been a really positive journey, and that's going to continue, as is our journey on the continent for sure, which remains an absolute focus for us.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Mantis a little bit later. I know Paul's here, and I have great respect for Adrian and what he's done. Pascal, maybe just touch on something that IHG have been doing sort of strategically, which is trying to consolidate a position in the luxury end of the brand spectrum with your acquisition of Regent and Six Senses. Do you see those brands coming to Africa? And where would you think that they could work?
Definitely. I mean, Six Senses have a lot of appetite to go to Africa. They go to Morocco. They have an hotel. They have a hotel in the Seychelles. And of course, there are so many treasures in Africa and unique destinations that this is definitely a focus for us. And that the reason we acquired the brand last year is that it's a beautiful brand with a very small number of hotels and a niche where we are not, the 40, 60 rooms hotel, top luxury, destination focus. So definitely we are integrating them as we speak in our system. And there is, of course, a strategy to move them where we were never able to go and grow our portfolio, but grow also the destination for our IHG Rewards Club member and all that to really senior destination. Regent, if there is space in large city, maybe it's not obvious that we can bring Regent here. Continue growing Intercontinental. And another brand which is in demand, especially in South Africa, is Kimpton. Especially with some of our partners who knows the Kimpton from the US and the rate and the type of positioning they have, are really keen to bring them at places like Cape Town or Joburg, Sandton, and so on. So again, a bit of more variety of brand, keeping still the 2 pillars, Holiday Inn and Intercontinental, of course. Holiday Inn Express is also a massive potential. We have starting having demand. This Holiday Inn Express is always coming when markets are maturing. So after the Holiday Inn, what's next? And that's, we can see and feel already for in South Africa, and we see the demand growing, and some investors thinking about that brand to develop in some part of Africa. So yeah, more brand, more varieties, again, agility to understand deeply the market and be really bringing the right brand, right partner, right place, and the right support behind it, just to make sure it's successful for everyone.
Yeah. I have to say, when Kimpton started in California, what, sort of 20, 30 years ago, yeah. I doubt they imagined they were going to be in Africa, but it certainly got momentum in Europe. Tim, I just wanted to pick up something that you were saying about yin yang and your parents and the sort of the Chinese alignment. It was very striking earlier on in Hannah's presentation, which I thought was excellent, where you looked at the rail network. I was just in Djibouti before I came through here, and many people in the audience will know that pretty much everything in Ethiopia has to come in through Djibouti, through the port, and essentially it's trucked in. That's a 3-day journey. And the Chinese have just opened a railway line, which has cut that journey time from 3 days to 8 hours. So you now have an electrified railway, which looks absolutely state-of-the-art. Frankly, it looks better than most of the railways in the UK, certainly. And, you know, it's going to run, and it does run straight into the middle of Ethiopia. And we can see the grand plan there. When you sort of rewind, hotels, of course, were always at transport infrastructure. They were always at railway stations, and then it was replaced by airports. But railway is going to become pretty essential in Africa, and it, rather like the jump to mobile. When you're looking at your growth plans, how do you factor in that type of grand plan infrastructure that's going on? And have you got an inside track through your parents?
We hope so. I mean, yin yang is, like most, or like all large Chinese industry conglomerates, is state-owned. So yes, we certainly hope that with big infrastructure projects coming into Africa, that often we've seen already actually with big infrastructure projects that have been completed in Africa, if there's a hotel there, there's often a clause which says that the operator should be X, Y, Z, and somehow related to Chinese business. And I think that gives us a very important advantage when we look at the kind of the grand plan for Africa. When I mentioned Afronord earlier was our initial investment vehicle to be able to expand into this continent. But now moving forwards, with a Chinese partner on board and the scale of investment that China has into Africa, I think that's going to accelerate our ability to be able to move quickly and capture some of those key projects which are attached to the infrastructure you're talking about. So yeah, I think exciting times ahead for Africa and for China alignment for sure. Yeah.
We're obviously in Ethiopia. I first came here 6 years ago, and the transformation in that period of time has been extraordinary. I was talking to Mark earlier. You said you had been here 15 years ago. Yeah. I don't know. We've no doubt got some rankings here. This is obviously an extraordinary country with an extraordinary range of attractions and places that people want to see. You've got Aksum, Gonda, Harar, the Danakil. I mean, the list is literally endless. Mark, just because we've only got about a minute left.
Sure.
Just from a perspective of, a brand like Mantis, which I think is really interesting, do you see an opportunity sort of outside the obvious opportunity of Addis? And, where would you go, and how do you convince people that this is a place to visit?
I mean, from a Mantis perspective, there's very few limitations because they can literally go anywhere they fancy with the concept that they have, whether it be luxury glamping or an eco experience. So they don't have the limitations of city infrastructure as many of our brands do. There's a huge opportunities here, and as you rightly say, I came here 15 years ago. I mean, the change here has been dramatic. And for those people driving in from the airport, you can see it. I mean, it looks like Dubai, but with more trees. It's an infrastructure ongoing. I don't know how many buildings, however, are at core and shell. And it's not easy to open a hotel here. International business is difficult, and that's driven by limitations with regards to currency here. But it's something that'll right itself going forward. The country has a great infrastructure.
Fantastic airline.
Absolutely. Similar to Rwanda and the steps that they've made in the last 5 years, taking the country forward. I think the future looks very, very bright, I must say.
We're actually out of time, but Pascal, just from your perspective, Ethiopia?
Exactly. We have 3 hotels under construction. We just can't wait to open them. A great Intercontinental, Holiday Inn as well. So it's coming. It takes a bit of time, more than we thought, but it's what it is. And, we have to be optimistic. We have to be, at the same time, patient and cautious. And that's, I think, what we need to do reasonably with everybody. But, the brands are coming, and we want to continue growing. And, this country, this city in particular, needs our brand.
Tim?
Yeah, we're delighted with the hotel we have here in Addis, but we also have another one under development and a hotel in Bishoftu. And we're looking at other opportunities further afield outside of Addis, actually. Because as you say, the country has got some incredible attractions that the rest of the world don't know well enough yet. So if we can get there and put good quality accommodation there, I'm sure we'll be very successful. So yeah, we're looking.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. If we can just thank the panelists, and thanks, guys.
Thank you.